Welcome to another episode of the Trulience Virtual Avatars podcast. Today, we are thrilled to have Mari Johnson, an internationally recognized digital authority and advocate for the humanitarian application of AI. Mari is a relentless inclusion and accessibility advocate known for co-creating Nadia, the first AI digital human for service delivery. She currently leads the AI Digital Human Cardiac Coach project. With over 25 years of experience, Mari has transformed technology landscapes across public and private sectors, delivering significant innovations in digital services and AI. Her accolades include being named one of Australia's 100 Women of Influence and receiving the Prime Minister's Award for Excellence in Public Sector Management. Join us as we explore Mari's groundbreaking work and her vision for the future of AI and digital humans. Mari, welcome to the show.
Richard, thank you very, very much. And I'm thrilled. I'm really thrilled to be joining you on the podcast. A big shout out to the great work that Trulience does. So I'm a big fan.
Indeed. And thank you very much. Let's jump in. And if we start by, if you could share a bit about your background beyond the introduction that I've given, and also talk about how you came to be involved in digital innovation and AI.
Well, it's a long story. I mean, I've been around for a while, actually since the earliest days of the internet. Some people find that a bit amusing, but still to the current day in working in AI and augmented service delivery. But to give some context, in the mid-1990s, I was working as an intelligence team leader at the National Crime Authority in Melbourne, here in Australia, on an organised crime task force. And back then using the latest technologies, which were not connected to the internet. And then after this, I went on to run the intelligence unit at the State Revenue Office in Victoria. And in that role, led one of Australia's first successful e-business projects in implementing e-payments, which was recognised as one of the world's first successful implementations of e-business. So I've always been drawn to implementation of complex systems and new things, and in these environments, really understanding the human experience in these complex servicing systems. And so over the years, it has been my experience that to truly understand the human experience, what goes on the front line in service delivery or the front line wherever it happens to be, the human experience is manifested in conversations. And these conversations are almost never only about or with the servicing organisation. And so that's sort of been my journey through this. And my philosophy has always been to deeply understand the human experience as that first principle of design. So that's sort of where I started, and this is where I am now.
Mm-hmm. And what was it? I'm very fascinated in the human aspect in technology and how we interface with technology. But for you, what was there anything in particular that sort of inspired you to focus on the humanitarian side of applications where you now focus?
Yeah. So deeply understanding that human experience is really the first principle of design, and there is no other starting point. And if we think back to the first quarter of the online century, since maybe the year 2000, the web world and service delivery paradigms were all very structured. Rigid rules, unbelievable complexity, forms, even apps that were really, really unbelievably complex and that really institutionalized barriers. So when we think about the web world, it in fact was an environment of complexity, at least as experienced by government and healthcare. And everything and everybody had to adapt to this structured world. So, regardless of a person's ability, they were forced to adapt to this structured world, forced to navigate this complexity, the incomprehensible language, the rigid channels, the inaccessible technology, and even rationed hours of access. So the human in these situations was intentionally designed out of the loop, and that has come at enormous cost. Most digital transformation strategies and service delivery efforts over the last 25 years have really been about automation and effectively treating people like machines. In coming to digital humans, what we were doing with Nadia and the digital human cardiac coach, it's really about the challenge for society is how can we make the web itself more human and, in fact, more human-like and naturally conversational. So that's what's brought me to my interest in AI digital humans.
I know we're going to come on to this later, but obviously you have a kind of a confluence and very personal connection to the cardiac coach. But before we jump into that, I know you've had an astonishing career, really, with many various roles, both public and private. Can you share some of, for you, your personal key highlights, key achievements that you're proudest of?
Well, so I look at my career, or any career, but I look at my career as really a patchwork of colours. And part of that tapestry is the volunteer work, the advocacy and fundraising work that I have done, which I'm incredibly proud to have done. And many of those have been an absolute highlight. And for example, I was part of a team of 10 who ran the London Marathon in 2012 for the Leukemia Foundation and raised $100,000. Each of us had to raise $10,000, so altogether we raised $100,000. And there's been things like that over the years, and you know, it's something that I enjoy doing. But I think in terms of career, that's part of that, the fabric of the career. But also having led Microsoft's worldwide public sector services and e-government business based in Seattle was very, very much a career highlight. And the interweaving international and political dimensions of my technology career have been quite exhilarating and inevitably risk-taking. And I look back and I really reflect on the fact that my advice has been sought by world leaders and global organisations on the geopolitical and the demographic dynamics of national technology. And we're seeing a lot of this still changing the way democracy functions. So it's been rather a sensational ride. And over the years, these various encounters have extended my view and my understanding of cross-cutting issues and even the over-the-horizon trends. But working on the Nadia project, this arc of my career with phenomenal group of people with disability was absolutely the highlight. A world-first innovation, some say helped kick the start of the digital human industry globally, that actually wouldn't have happened if it had not been driven and imagined and designed by people with disability.
I mean, it is truly astonishing, and the support that you've had in pushing forward the initiative. I know in part of the Nadia project, you involved Kate Blanchett, or to be part of the voice of the digital human, or AI, that one of the AIs, one of the digital humans that you were working with, and it's obviously that's a celebrity name that's kind of easy to kind of point people to, but you've had lots of support across healthcare. In fact, I mean, you've driven this into healthcare settings with an astonishing array of healthcare organisations globally. We don't necessarily need to drop into this, but I'm also aware from having read your book about the Nadia project that it's it's not been without its confrontations and controversy. But that's probably for a slightly different show, and not to drop into the political side of things. But I know you've had uphill battles to fight, not just on trying to figure out the technology side of things, but also working with government.
Yeah, and that's why the title came to me very early. Nadia, Politics, Bigotry, Artificial Intelligence. It came to me very, very early. And that's how the story was woven, So lessons there, not only in government, but, healthcare, anywhere where there's vested interests in legacy arrangements, particularly where there's huge dollars associated with the vested interests. So there's lessons for everybody in that. Yeah,
indeed. I'm experiencing it myself as a parent, and with a parent of young children, with a growing evidence of body of evidence of data around the impact of smartphones, or actually social media, on young children, and there's a kind of growing discussion, certainly in the US and here in the UK where I am, and that is a difficult one to balance for government that obviously has a lot of interest and investment from from the large tech companies, as to how to walk that line, both to do the right thing, so but as politicians to keep their party happy, keep their electorate happy. But as a parent and not a politician, it can be quite frustrating. So I also have some first-hand experience of
yeah.
So
look,
aside from the politics, well, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say on that one. I mean, I've got 4 grandsons. The eldest 16, so that's a privileged position, and I see the world through their eyes as well. And education, you talk about digital humans and AI, that is a liberator, I see, for the kids and how they're learning, and students and so forth. It's a big topic, and we can maybe have another discussion around the role of digital humans in education. All my grandsons, who a number of them were sitting with me on my lap when I was testing Nadia, and obviously have seen the Trulience avatars that we've been working with for the digital human cardiac coach. They say they want their own. Wouldn't it be great to have a digital human reading teacher or science teacher, where they can just interact with it all the time? It's a very exciting future. I hope that in trying to manage the current risks or perceived risks, that we don't shortchange the future, because it's their future, right?
Yeah. I couldn't agree more, and you're right in that we need to be mindful of not shortchanging, as you put it, shortchanging the future, or shortchanging future generation, and it's a delicate balance. It's a delicate balance to try to both ensure that we can reap the benefits, and that our children can reap the benefits of technology, like having your own private tutor, regardless of your background,
Yeah.
regardless of your economic status, which I think is,
Yeah.
from an educational perspective, is revolutionary. It is groundbreaking that is available now, which is something that
Yeah.
we are part of. We are pushing that forward at Trulience, yet
Yeah.
also cognizant of the yeah, the quote unquote dangers. And
Yeah.
I think, I mean, there are
Yeah.
real dangers of unbridled access to certain types of technology, access to social media. Um, so it's a delicate balance to tread, and one that I'm right in the thick of. But
It is. And if you think
I'd
about the
love to
demographic change,
say that again, Murray.
so if you think about the demographic change, um, I'm sure it's the same in the United Kingdom. The school teachers retiring, there's not enough teachers coming in. The demand that's on the teachers there for all sorts of things. These 19th century models of education and healthcare won't survive this demographic change, and so these technologies. I mean, I'm obviously passionate about digital humans as one example of that. I think are going to be part of an augmented learning journey for people, right from youngest years right up to wherever, university or whatever, where someone can interact with these over and over again, not just be limited to, school hours or working hours. It's actually it's exciting, but there's a lot to work through. Anyway, I think that's we could have a big conversation on that. But I just see my grandsons with playing Formula One, right, games where they've got their own avatars, they've got all the kit. That's a learning environment.
Mm.
Learning about aerodynamics and car mechanics and all sorts of things. There's different ways of looking at things, and I think this is part of what I'm so excited about with digital humans.
Mm. Yeah. Um, Talk about pivotal moments in your or projects in your career that have shaped
A
your approach to technology and innovation.
pivotal moment. Look, I probably would go back to my earliest experience. I mentioned at the National Crime Authority in Melbourne, and that was before the internet was widely or even available at all to organisations. Now, this was an operational law enforcement environment, and I was running intelligence. And the chief inspector who headed up um, the investigation, a brilliant man, and he said to me, "What technology do you need?" Right? And he said, whatever you need, just let me know and I'll get it for you." So, we used some pretty, back then, pretty amazing, like link software, which showed relationships between all sorts of things, people and products and whatever. And that was a very empowering sort of conversation because it really made a relationship between myself and this chief inspector one of trust and mutual respect. Um, he allowed me or gave me the confidence to push boundaries on technology, and in doing so, advance understanding of this particular crime that we were looking at in ways that wouldn't have been possible. So from that was pivotal in a number of ways. From then, I would always um, challenge and ask why and why not, and explore the boundaries of technology, which is basically what I did in that role. And that was really a major trajectory in my career. Clearly, heading to Microsoft was another one of those trajectories or pivot points, but that was a very early one, and I've often thought that that's not one ever to forget.
Yeah, but I mean, what a privilege to be in a position where you're afforded that kind of that length of rope, so to speak, just to say, tell me what you want.
Yeah.
We will.
And it was an operational environment. So this is one of the other aspects of my career which I've come to actually enjoy, operational service delivery or operational environments. And in this particular one, it was high tempo law enforcement where the intelligence immediately fed back to the operation, and what came out of the operation fed back to the intelligence. And that there obviously needed to be a fair degree of certainty about the sorts of information I was conveying back. I had a team I was working, or that I was managing on this. So I've often reflected on that, and I think that it's really assisted my decision making and my risk tolerance for taking on new things.
You're known for your work on Nadia most prominently, and the AI digital human cardiac coach. Could you tell us more about these projects and their impact to date?
Yeah, well, obviously Nadia is well known, but the essence of that, and the essence of the digital human cardiac coach as well, quite simply, it's to break through complexity of the text dense web servicing model that really epitomises government and healthcare, which really is so discriminatory and is a barrier for people to understand and communicate regarding access to these essential services, and in a way that is relevant to them via natural conversations. So to break through this complexity and to provide a bit more context on that, the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability is actually quite remarkable drafting. And as I explained in the Nadia book, that actually formed the basis of the design determinants of Nadia, because the UN Convention talks about accepting and facilitating augmentative and alternative communication so that people with disability can receive and impart information and ideas on an equal basis. So when we think about Nadia and the digital human cardiac coach, that's the essence of that. And this is common to disability services, to healthcare, and access to justice, which are all big areas of our economy and societies. So that was really the essence of the Nadia work and of the digital human cardiac coach.
It's fascinating, and it can be easy to ignorantly overlook accessibility needs more broadly as someone who is able-bodied, and would in my day-to-day life do not have a lens of needing, being aware of accessibility issues for myself, but it's so important, and it's to be able to facilitate that is it's critical. And I think this also goes slightly to your point about the shifting demographic, and I've been looking at this quite closely over the last couple of weeks, is digging into the data to look at the shifting mean age across different countries. Having enough people for the people is going to be we're experiencing a shortfall already in different sectors, in education, in accessibility, in the justice system. And how I think of things and how we think of things at Trulience is that having a digital human interface, a digital human that is conversational and real time and interactive, is one way to help get around this issue. So with with the digital cardiac coach, tell me about how that came about and
Yeah.
the primary goals.
Well, the Nadia project, or the Nadia and the digital human cardiac coach origins are common. So that's why I spoke about that in the Nadia book. But so it is a personal journey, the digital human cardiac coach, and it started back in 2006 when my husband, Alan, experienced a sharp pain in his arm when he was doing a 20-kilometre run through snow-covered canyon in the high altitude of Winnemucca, Nevada. We were living in the US. That's when I was working at Microsoft. Alan's an industrial engineer, and he was working at a mine in Nevada. And he was only 48 at the time and a non-smoker. As a result of that episode, he had an emergency 5-way bypass, and totally unplanned, obviously. And over the years, he's had further surgeries because of some genetic and other factors. In 2017, just a couple of months after I finished work on the Nadia project, he underwent his 4th heart surgery. So all up, he has 8 cardiac bypass grafts and 4 stents. So we had this experience in the US and in Australia, and both of this experience really showed that there is really a lack of support in this space. Alan's known as Cardiac Man, and he's the co-creator, and we call him patient number 1 for the digital human cardiac coach. So his background is also in expert systems. So we had an unusual convergence of professional background and also this experience of in healthcare, in cardiac. So it's really been a 17-year journey, and we were frustrated by the lack of support for heart patients and their families. And as with the Nadia project, what people are looking for is someone to talk to in those early days, and then in the years since, conversations about rehab, or conversations about exercise, or conversations about lots of things on your in your life journey. So we both came to realise that, as with the Nadia project, there were systemic problems that couldn't be overcome in the traditional servicing model. And we've written about this, that government e-health had failed us. Different to Nadia, what we have designed with the digital human cardiac coach, cardiac health is a universal global body of knowledge. It's not like the disability supports in Australia, which sort of just related to the circumstances of the NDIS in Australia. Cardiac health is a universal body of knowledge. And so when we think about the cardiovascular disease kills 18 million people every year, it's actually been classified as a pandemic by the World Health Organization. And health illiteracy is a major impact on mortality. And we both admit that we were health illiterate, even with, all our professional knowledge of many things. We were health illiterate in the cardiac space. But for many people, that health illiteracy becomes a deadly factor. And people are denied access to cardiac rehabilitation because they don't know to ask for it, or they are disabled, or they are women who then have to go and care for their families. There's a lot of circumstances why people don't access cardiac rehabilitation. And so what we've designed is this a body of knowledge. We call it the corpus, which is co-designed. It's not a large language model in terms of, drawn on from the Wild West of the internet. It's actually built up about the conversations that people have on their cardiac journey. And so the bureaucratic complexity that information is presented with in cardiac care is very, very similar to what we'd experience with the Nadia project. People just want to have an everyday conversation. And so the experience with our experience going through the United States and in Australia, where you do cardiac rehabilitation and then you fall off a cliff. You've got nobody to speak with. And so having that body of knowledge to be able to interact with, to give a patient and their family, their carer, confidence to resume life, to be able to understand why taking medications is important, to be able to just enjoy your life is so critically important for secondary prevention. And so what we've done is not only built up this corpus for the digital human cardiac coach, but also around that built up a business case, because once designed and developed, this then can be applied globally. And it does need to be locally customized, if you like, so which is what we were doing in the US with Dr. Chris Hillier in Wilmington. So having these types of services localized, which means that the common words that are used in different settings, by different communities could be very contextual. So words that we would use in Australia for certain foods would not have any meaning, for example, to people in Wilmington, North Carolina. But that's just the localization. The core is common, which is why having this, being able to speak about this, doing the great work with Trulience, speaking about it in different environments means that this idea can then take off around the world, so that cardiac rehabilitation and, in fact, other types of services can be designed in a different way.
How do you see, that is, yeah, I hadn't, in my mind, I've worked in localization, with a localization software business.
Yep.
And obviously
that's it.
Building Trulience, but I hadn't kind of married those two components and seen the necessity to have a corpus, a language, kind of a corpus of language, called a language model, some small private language model that's domain specific, plus coupled with a localization layer on top of that. That's really interesting.
Correct. Correct. So, for example, when I was working with Chris Hillier in Wilmington, the local foods obviously are very sometimes culturally specific, not something that we might be familiar with in Australia, or even the words, the slang and the idioms that people use is really important, because that's how people speak. And what we do in this is to say, rather than expect people to not only overcome this health illiteracy, but to also be a translator, have this model localised so that if it's African American community or an Australian Indigenous community or communities in London, for example, the core knowledge of cardiac care is common, but all the idioms, the analogies, the slang is very localised and has meaning for those communities. So, yeah, that's the idea around it. And we've got more in the pipeline. Can't talk about it at the moment, but yeah, it's the idea is just taken off, which is terrific.
How are you looking at how to seed this globally?
Yeah, it's exactly right. How to seed it globally. A couple of years ago, I did a webinar with Chris Hillier, and we were talking about the Digital Human Cardiac Coach project. He was talking about his work in Wilmington. That's before he moved to the United Kingdom, but After that, I released all the body of knowledge of the digital human cardiac coach onto GitHub, and left it there for 2 years. So that basically just released the IP. So if people wanted to pick it up, they could. But our own thinking and development has obviously evolved since that time. So I took it down from GitHub while we continued to do further work on that. So my idea is to continue to talk about it, so that other people can, and that's why I wrote the book. I wrote the book not only about Nadia, but the digital human cardiac coach, and with all the references, so that it could help seed these ideas by entrepreneurs, by innovators, by people who want to do the investments, and just get it going that way.
Yeah, it's no mean feat to do that.
Well, if you want to accelerate these things, you can't hold on to it. You know, it's I came to realize that. Do it, take it to a point, let it out. People grab onto it. That's great. And in the meantime, we just keep innovating ourselves. We keep working on it. We keep applying things. On my website, I've got a little story about taking one of your digital humans into the remote Australia. We did a trip to the Nullarbor, and I wanted to sort of demonstrate that where there's no services, really, health services there. Now, wouldn't this be phenomenal if this was available in remote Australia? So we've got some videos and pictures and that type of thing of opening up the back of the wagon and having one of your avatars popping out at the back of the wagon and us talking to it.
Whoa, I've got to see that. Yeah. And
I'll send it to you.
Yeah, please. In what language?
That was English. And so that's another part of the...
You go ahead.
Yeah, it's a good question in terms of other languages. There's automated translation is phenomenal, actually, but automation in languages can also encounter this health illiteracy problem, and what translates locally may not completely make sense. So even automated translation, I think, needs to have a layer of localization around it. So with local speakers, and of course, for many cultures, such as the Australian Indigenous community, but many other cultures, information or knowledge is conveyed by not only words, but mannerisms and the way the head moves, or the arms or hands or whatever. So the extent to which those aspects are important really need to be locally wrapped with co-design. So, but yeah, I mean, so we had to start with English because that's where we are, but that doesn't stop the body of knowledge, which is not bounded by language.
Indeed. Now, you're very much a practitioner. You're out in the world, out in the field, bumping up against reality and testing things out. In what ways do you see digital humans being used currently? And we'll come on to the future, but what are you seeing right now in terms of service delivery and the user experiences?
Look, there are so many examples. There's a Facebook group called Virtual Beings, and they've got nearly 10,000 members, which is just quite phenomenal when you think about it. This invaluable global forum connecting players and projects and so forth. But there are a number of long-standing use cases and applications of virtual beings, some people call them, or digital humans. One I spoke about in the Nadia book called Sim Coach. This is brilliant. It is for veterans with PTSD and their families, and it helps guide them through access to information. And the Sim Coach human agents, as they were called, or virtual human agents, were really to identify the symptoms of PTSD, so then assistance and support could be provided. And so this was all about breaking down barriers to access for people who are traumatized. And there's a very, very similar role to Nadia, and also very similar to the situation, when somebody's had a heart event, for example. SimCoach actually was evaluated by DARPA, and it found amazing results. It showed that there was simultaneous use of two techniques to elicit disclosure that would otherwise be incompatible. The virtual humans afforded people anonymity. So I'm talking to a computer basically, but it looks human. And because it looks human, it builds rapport. So that was a long-standing example. Also in the US, Department of Veterans Affairs has the use of virtual worlds and virtual humans to assist veterans with amputations in their rehabilitation. And what that found, the evaluation of that found, is that what the avatar does, the person copies. So this is real-life clinical application. And so knowledge transference occurs. But we're seeing digital humans in the airline industry, like as automotive concierges, and in recording and preserving cultural knowledge. So we're seeing digital humans in all sectors and industries, and of course the movie and entertainment industry is being disrupted by virtual beings, digital humans as well. So these are going to really change pretty much all sectors and all industries, and they've been now around for a long time. So real life applications. And when you think about SimCoach and Nadia and Digital Human Cardiac Coach, these are really substantial use cases. And if I could just also emphasize that all of these had what I call co-design applied, which means that they're all designed together with the people who would be using them, whether it's disabled veterans or heart patients or people with disability.
Last point's so important, right? To design with the end user, really.
Yeah,
it's something that we're keen on and keen to maintain. Moving on to, I guess, slightly broader view, thinking about artificial intelligence more widely, and as relates to digital humans. But what's your perspective on the current state of artificial intelligence as we record this now in June 2024? And which advancements do you find most exciting?
Most exciting, I would say the general direction about the rapid democratization of these technologies. So I do think that is the most exciting, because it means that innovation is not locked up and the barriers to innovation and creativity come down. So that means that probably won't be, a education institution that designs the digital human teacher. It will mean that it will be an innovator, or it will be a young person who's had an experience in the school system where they've seen it could be done better and they'll do it themselves. So it really unlocks the power of creativity. But even more than that, I mean, AI, in my experience with my family, has been a liberator. And it actually has been a lifesaver. I mean, we are a big user of the Apple ecosystem. I've got a Mac Studio, iPads, the latest phone, the latest watch, and so forth, all connected into Apple Health. And for my husband's health, he's always connected. AI in that ecosystem literally has been a lifesaver, and that goes beyond any one particular device or application because it's become an ecosystem. And so when it gets to that level, I think we're breaking a lot of new ground in terms of providing people with independence and confidence and a great ability to continue to not only enjoy life, but to contribute in ways probably not previously possible. And so the democratization of these technologies, which means that we all wear them, we can all use them, we can all create in ways not otherwise possible.
Yeah. And in particular with the field of digital humans, how do you see that evolving over the next few years, especially in areas like healthcare and other public services?
Well, a few years ago, Accenture forecast that virtual nursing assistants, so quite a specific application of these, would be a $20 billion market. Now, that figure is absolutely blown away by other research, which obviously you would be aware of, which speaks about the global digital human avatar market to reach, $530 billion by 2030. China sees so great an opportunity in the field of digital humans that they declared an action plan to dominate the digital human field globally. These are big trends, and Gartner actually identified that the disruption fueled by digital humans would be in the order of historical disruptions equivalent to the smartphone and personal computers. These are more than curiosities and, interesting applications in different areas. These will affect every field, and they're very, very significant trends. So yes, healthcare is a massive one because of the economics of lack of access to healthcare, because of the economics around people having to go to hospital for unplanned events. The cost to the health system in managing that. There's whole economics around this. The cost of penalties that hospitals in the United States bear for unplanned readmissions. So being able to support people with conversational agents, if you like, conversational digital humans, which are co-designed, is not only a good humanitarian thing to do, but the business case is just so overwhelming. And I think that's why we're seeing a lot of this start to really be identified in a number of areas. So yes, healthcare a big one. Education, I would say, is equally as massive.
That's that reflects what we're seeing for sure. I mean, beyond that as well in customer service. So
yes,
it's similar in some respects. In parallel to healthcare, or one aspect of healthcare, in that we're seeing digital humans being used as a digital, or at least augmenting what's referred to as the digital front door into primary care.
Exactly.
We see that in the same thing, but really in the commercial world, in customer service, having an augmented digital humans augmenting the customer, the user, the website visitor experience as their first point of contact, and sitting on top of what people are now fairly familiar with, which is having a chat bot, and which have now kind of been massively influenced and kind of accelerated in their capability with essentially being powered by a conversational artificial intelligence. So having a conversational artificial intelligence powering a digital human that you can interact with and have that real-time conversation from a customer service perspective is a way better experience than having a default message pop up saying, we only respond to people every 5 hours or whatever.
That's right.
It just
That's
enhances
right.
access and enhances the customer experience. So kind of better
That's
all
right.
around. Looking further
Exactly.
afield and further to the future for you, what are your future aspirations for the development and application of artificial intelligence and digital humans?
You know, quite exciting. I mean, obviously, continuing the work on the digital human cardiac coach. As I said, we've got a number of other things in the pipeline, but I imagine a future with digital humans in the home. And I was in conversations actually a number of years ago about this in the US with a colleague. So keep watch on that space as well. So when you think about being able to age in place, right? That you go into a different territory then. To have your home as the place where you live and age is quite a remarkable thing. Having not only a connected home, but having a home where a digital human has a presence that can remind a person of doing things. So this is just about taking your medications, but it might be about having enough to drink, having enough water to drink. Those type of conversations that happen in the home, which is about keeping people connected and well and all that type of thing. You know, that is I think a new horizon as well. As I said, a number of years ago, I was having a conversation with a colleague in the US about this with a developer, a property developer, who saw as an opportunity to develop premium, if you like, units, retirement units, which, yes, he could charge a premium for, but might have this as a presence in there. But of course, that means that there would be work required, not only on the particular digital human interface being culturally relevant to that particular community, but also what are the conversations that someone might want to have in their home depending on their circumstances. Even just reminders to, call your son or you call your daughter, hey, reminder, families coming over at the weekend, to bring that conversational dynamic into the home for people as they age, and particularly for people who buy themselves. So that will be very exciting. That'll be very exciting to see that happen.
Yeah, it's a kind of, for me, it's a very visceral driver. My granny is still alive. She's been in a home for coming up to 10 years now. She's coming up to 107, and I went to visit last week with my children, and she came alive when we were there. And obviously we can call, and we do, but she needs somebody there holding some, to coordinate that for her. And yes, there are people in and around the place, but we left and then went back in because I went outside. The children were running around in the garden, and I went and played with them for about half an hour, and then we came back in. And in that time, my granny, she'd had, before I left, she'd had her tea brought to her, a bowl of soup and a few other bits. And when I went back in after half an hour, she was still sitting there, hadn't touched a thing. And because she's, she kind of just needed a reminder that there was her food, but an encouragement to kind of to eat. And it would add something to have a presence. Obviously, physical is great, but in the absence of that, having a human representation, a digital human that she could build a bond with. I think for me, that's something that's quite personal, but I can see that there's application in this field and many others to help where there's a shortfall of people to provide service for other people.
Yeah. And another area which, I know some people might feel uncomfortable about, but I actually quite like the idea, and that is the idea of, I call it digital immortality. So, so when people pass, their families have photos and more videos, obviously, but it's only one way. And Alan and I often talk about, wouldn't it be great to be able to have our own digital humans that when we're alive, you can teach things so that when you're not there, when you die, your children, your grandchildren can have conversations with you, passing stories and so forth. Now, some of this is being done in, you see some examples of, some not celebrities, but more historic icons. But to have this as a service where you can record your life as you go. More and more of us have got videos, and so all this content is already there. I think I mean, obviously it's coming. I don't see it as creepy at all. In centuries past, only the very rich people could have paintings of themselves, so that when they went, their children and descendants could see this painting. And then when photography came along, it was people who could afford photography, and you went along to the special booth, and if you could afford it, you could have your photo taken. So, but that was not available to everybody. But gradually, as it democratized, more people were able to have photographs, and the same with videos and so forth. So I think that this is sort of a bit of a natural trajectory in that area. And I don't think all the technologies are obviously already there. It's just sitting down and doing it, but that's something that I think would be pretty interesting.
We actually have a project with a TV presenter in the Netherlands who passed away a few years ago. With the permission of his family, the TV station have worked with us to recreate him, a digital a digital representation, the virtual digital human equivalent. So that's a really interesting project to work on. And
be great.
To your point, I hadn't really thought about it in the sense of it being looking at the trajectory of technologies and how we have captured representations of ourselves quite in that way. But yeah, that makes loads of sense. Paintings, photos, videos, digital equivalents. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, not for everybody, but something that I'd be interested in.
Indeed. Are there any big trends that you can see that might be nascent right now, or emerging trends or technologies that you think will have a big impact in the world?
Emerging trends. I spoke about some of this in the Nadia book. Robotics, the Optimus robot, Elon Musk's robot. I think, again, that could be something that might be in the home as well. When it becomes more sophisticated. It's not just for industrial processing and doing things like that, and not even really for doing the dishes, because you just have a dishwasher, right? But there are particular use cases where the Optimus robot, I think, would be really groundbreaking, not only in the home but more broadly. So in the Nadia book, I spoke about thinking about the Optimus robot as a funded support. So if it's like through a disability program or through healthcare even, having that funded by whether it's an insurance company or government means that you don't need to rely on the human workforce, having a human in the house or wherever it is doing those types of jobs, and extends the human workforce capability. And I think if there was, so in the National Disability Insurance Scheme, I mean, obviously there's funding for all sorts of assistive technology, but the assistive technology market globally is massive. And some of this is driven by the aging of the population. Obviously, as we age, we take on elements of disability, can't hear so well, can't see so well. Physically, we change. And so what sometimes is designed for specific uses, such as disability support, then becomes mainstream. And when it becomes mainstream, then the market dynamics are completely different. But the markets for assistive technology globally are huge. And I think one of the big disruptors is going to be the likes of the Optimus robot, as that becomes more and more developed and sophisticated. And again, specific use cases. I know a lot of people say it can't stack the dishwasher very well. I'm thinking, well, maybe it's not meant to stack the dishwasher, but for specific use cases. I'm actually quite excited about that. I think it's a pretty cool invention.
Yeah, I've seen a video of it. It's mind blowing. Now, before we wrap and move to kind of parting thoughts, obviously technology, I'm all for it, and I work in it, and I'm pushing it forwards where I can, and it would be remiss of anyone working in this space to not have not be mindful of ethical considerations and challenges. From your perspective, what do you see as some of the biggest challenges here?
Yeah. So ethics has to be an action, not just a policy or not just a framework or whatever. It actually has to be action oriented. So the way I approach this with the Nadia project and also with Digital Human Cardiac Coach is co-design, because co-design wraps around the whole body of work, if you like. And through co-design, you understand risks, you surface assumptions, you expose bias. And so ethics I see as an action, it has to be in action, something that is actually done, not a form that is ticked. And it becomes action when it becomes part of the design process, and embedding that in co-design. Therefore, that means that when the co-design process identifies like issues, bias, for example, or risk in a particular environment, then an ethics process can explore exactly what that situation is. And the ethics might need to become quite a structured process then through research, and the ethics that come into academic research. So my concern at the moment is that obviously there's a lot of work being done on AI frameworks. I mean, even here in Australia just today, there was a statement about, an AI government framework. Ethics has got to be action, and think that there's quite a way to go yet before ethics becomes part of the development process of the particular digital human or the AI application or whatever. It's not after the fact, because if it's after the fact and somebody suffers harm, then it's not ethics' role to mop that up. That has to happen beforehand. So it's incredibly important. Ethics also is not a brake on innovation. I actually think that ethics enables innovation at times by giving guardrails so that the full exploration of the potential can be done. So that's my view on ethics. Like I said, right from the word go in my career, I've always been action-oriented, and ethics has to be an action.
That's a really great key takeaway, key soundbite. So yeah, it can be easy to, as you say, fall into the realm of a policy existing on a website somewhere that some people know about, but not everyone knows, and that's kind of it.
Exactly.
And same question as applies really specifically to LLMs or large language models.
Correct. And so what we did with Nadia was a bounded language model. Was not a large language model. Same thing with the cardiac coach, because large language models, where we're talking about these type of use cases, do run into a lot of problems. So, for example, with the cardiac coach, you could imagine that a large language model, which may have been sourced from the internet on authoritative sources, such as some hospitals or Heart Foundation type of sites, often are written in such complex language that people don't understand. And so there's assumptions in those bodies of knowledge about what somebody may or may not know. So having a bounded domain means that you get depth rather than getting breadth of knowing everything. There is contextual depth, and I think what we'll see is language models which are bounded, but having modules of different bounded domains rather than the ultimate large language model, which is just fanciful, really. Yes, so in large language models, obviously, we've seen a number of problems already over the years with Microsoft and Tay, and there's so many examples. So the internet is biased, and you don't want that bias to come into particularly service delivery domains, as such we've been talking about. So invest in the establishment of a co-designed bounded domain, and you'll get the contextual depth.
Yeah, that's we bump into that all the time. I mean, it's kind of different horses for different courses, right? So
yeah, correct.
The open large language models great for lots and lots of use cases. A lot I use daily.
Yes.
Research, ideation, and like loads more. Almost without fail, all of our customers, whether it's a bank, a healthcare organization, an educational institution, they need to have control over what is in the language model, and it just wouldn't make any sense for them to use an open large language model that draws from the whole of the internet. So that's a
and so, for example, for the cardiac coach and health illiteracy, so attempting to source content, if you like, from the general population, and the general population is largely health illiterate. So there's been a lot of research done, and even in Australia, I know in the UK, health illiteracy is about 60 to 70% of the population. Okay, far higher in disadvantaged areas. So if you're sourcing content from the general population, 60% of who are health illiterate, the large language model will have gaps. Okay, it'll also have errors because people will talk about things in inaccurate ways. Like go and have a meds holiday, for example. So there are errors brought about by health illiterate populations being part of a large language model sourcing strategy. So the large language model cannot learn what a great percentage of the population don't talk about. So there's some fundamental errors in assumptions on those type of large language models. So by co-designing it, particularly around particular conversations that people want to have at different points in their life, brings depth to that conversation.
So important to have that, and to recognise the limitations of the large language models as well as the power of it. Well, as we close, just before we do, just wondered if you had any advice. What advice would you have for aspiring technologists and entrepreneurs who want to make an impact in the world of artificial intelligence and digital innovation, working with digital humans?
Yeah. So the first thing I'd say is focus relentlessly on a problem. Focus on the problem, whatever it is, and work to understand the different use cases. I'm a great advocate of co-design, so invest in that. Above all, I'd say stay positive and be excited about the future. The great thing for technologists and entrepreneurs is the capability to connect and work globally, which is what I'm doing still. Connecting with people in the US and UK, including with my great friend, Dr. Chris Hillier. So the democratization of all this means that you have a very long life in this field. And if you focus on the problem, you will find really, really innovative solutions that the world is really needing. So that's what I would say. Focus on the problem and stay positive.
That is great advice. And for all of our listeners and viewers, where with you and follow your work?
Yes, on my website, which is mari-johnson.com, on LinkedIn and Twitter, and of course through the Nadia book, which documents my work over a minute. Terrific. So yes, so please connect and follow, and I wish everybody all the best in your journey.
Great, thank you. We'll drop a link to your website and to where people can find you on LinkedIn and Twitter as well. But Mari, thank you so much for taking time out of your day, your evening, now in Australia, and coming on the show. It's been an absolute privilege and an honour talking to you.
Thank you very much, Rich, and thank you to everybody at the Trulience team. It truly is a pleasure.
Lovely. Take care, Mari. Speak soon.
Thank you.